Who would have thought when the news of Tom Brady's official retirement broke yesterday that it would be just the second biggest NFL story by nightfall, thanks to a class action lawsuit filed by Brian Flores. In it, he accused the league of racial discrimination against black coaches and brings forward some pretty compelling evidence, courtesy of his former boss, Patriots head coach Bill Belichick. As the suit lays out, after Flores was fired from the Dolphins last month, he applied for other head coaching positions, including with the New York Giants. But then a few days before his interview, Bill Belichick texted him, congratulating him on getting the job. After some back and forth, Flores realized Belichick mistook him for Brian Daboll, another NFL coach who is white and who Belichick had apparently been told already had the job. Flores described his reaction on CNN this morning.
It was humiliating, to be quite honest. I was going on an interview for a job that was already handed to someone else.
Flores and his attorneys say his interview was a sham conducted only to comply with an NFL rule that requires minority candidates be considered for certain jobs within the league. The suit also alleges major misconduct surrounding Flores' firing from the Dolphins, claiming the writing had been on the wall since Flores refused to accept bribes from the team's owner in exchange for tanking games so they could get a top draft pick. And it's not just Flores. The lawsuit claims to act on behalf of more than 40 black coaches, coordinators, specialty coaches, and others who they believe were being discriminated against throughout the NFL.
Look, I love coaching football, and I still want to coach. Let's be clear about that. But this is bigger than coaching. This is bigger than me. Many have come before and done a lot to create change in this country for people of color. And I just felt like in this instance, it was my turn to step up.
Michael Willemin, one of Brian Flores' attorneys, joins me now. Thanks so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me this evening.
You contend that Giants interview was a pretense, a sham, to feign compliance with the so-called Rooney Rule. Would you have known that were it not for Bill Belichick's texts?
Probably not. And that was certainly the initial indication, of course, that our client had, that the interview that he'd be walking into just a couple of days later would be for a job that had already been given to someone else.
Why did he decide to go through with it after it was pretty clear from those texts that the job would not be his, that he had no chance for the job, that it had been filled?
Well, I think Mr. Flores would tell you, as a man of integrity and as a man who likes to think the best and hope the best in others, that he can go into that interview and, notwithstanding the circumstances, do a great job, as he did, and be fairly considered for the job. Unfortunately, that's not ultimately what happened, but he was a man of his convictions, wanted to make sure he saw the process through, and ultimately brought this litigation once it was clear that equal opportunity was not going to be afforded.
You know, Devin McCourty, obviously a legendary Patriot, has been on the show quite a few times, tweeted about the litigation lawsuit fired by his former coach. He said, Flo has always been a special individual, has been pivotal in my career, and love that I can support him for calling out what we all already know. Is Mr. Flores getting support from players in the league, other coaches? Obviously, he's only one other black head coach, but some of the people on whose behalf he's acting?
Yeah, he's been getting just a groundswell of support from players, from former coaches, GMs, et cetera. I mean, he's, the only person, the only entity at now that's not supporting him really is the NFL, who literally an hour after we filed this 60-page lawsuit without having done any investigation, demonstrating a total lack of introspection, just declared that it was without merit.
Well, let's read part of their what you would call lack of introspection. Here's part of a statement from the NFL yesterday. The NFL and our clubs are deeply committed to ensuring equitable employment practices and continue to make progress in providing equitable opportunities throughout our organizations. Diversity is core to everything we do, and there are few issues on which our clubs and our internal leadership team spend more time. We will defend against these claims, which are without merit. I assume that means because they have a contract with Jay-Z, they care about the issue. What's your reaction, Michael, to the statement from the NFL, the response?
Well, it's a completely ridiculous statement. I saw a tweet the other day that noted that diversity must be so core to them that it never comes to the surface. And that's actually, why we're bringing this lawsuit. To say that we've made progress when almost 20 years ago, when the Rooney Rule was passed, there were more black head coaches in the NFL than there are today, is ridiculous. And we've had Troy Vincent, who's a senior vice president or an executive vice president, at the NFL, has come out and said there is a double standard. The chief diversity officer over there has come out and said, this is our problem. We need to embrace this. And they're just not willing to do it.
You know, let's focus on those numbers for a second. I'll tell you, they are staggering. And long before your client filed this suit, I hope people who suggest they care about equity and fairness and tolerance would focus on these. The Rooney Rule, correct me if I'm wrong, is 20 years old. There have been 15 black coaches total in those 20 years. 10 hired in the past decade. Every single one of them is gone. So that today we have one black coach in the whole head coach in the whole NFL. Is that accurate?
That's right. And 14 out of the 15 black coaches that have been hired since the Rooney Rule, of course, have been terminated. Whereas you look at white coaches who have been given second chances, who have been given longer tenures, and who remain employed in positions with equal or lesser success than the black coaches who have lost their jobs.
Yeah, I should have mentioned one critical number that I left out that I think people have learned if they didn't know it in the last 24 hours. Well, I said one black coach, who I believe is Mike Tomlin from Pittsburgh, who's been there forever. 70% roughly of the players in the NFL are black. That's roughly right?
That's right. And the coaching ranks largely come, at least in the first instance, from players, from that 70% black pool.
Is the color of Mr. Flores' skin also part of the reason why he thought he lost his job with the Dolphins, considering a pretty good record there over the past couple of years?
Well, that's correct. And there are various reasons for that. But just on its face, it's completely absurd that Mr. Flores lost his job in Miami. He coached them to 2 back-to-back winning seasons for the first time in nearly 2 decades, and ultimately was let go and then really maligned in the media using stereotypes that are often attributed to black people.
You know, we're trying to focus here on the racial discrimination claims, but this allegation against the owner of the team, I want to make sure I got this right. Your client is contending that the owner of the team was offered him $100,000 for every game he lost, because that would raise their number in terms of their ability to draft a top player. Is there, other than your client's word, is there any evidence that this owner actually offered this? It's a bribe. Offered this bribe?
Well, when you use the term evidence, I think it's important to kind of break that down a little bit. Look, the owner told Mr. Flores exactly what you just said, but this was not just one conversation. This was an ongoing theme in the Dolphins organization, where when Mr. Flores did not start losing games at the pace that the owner was happy with, he started getting pressure from his general manager and others in the organization saying, look, you're compromising our draft position. So when you talk about what the evidence will show, this is not going to have been a secret, let's just say, in the Miami Dolphins organization.
My understanding is in your pleadings, you also include some discussion of race norming. Could you explain for people who haven't followed what it is and why it's relevant to your client's case?
Sure. So race norming is essentially, to simplify it, making assumptions based on someone's race with respect to, in this particular circumstances, their cognitive abilities. And the reason it's important is that when the NFL entered into its concussion settlement a few years back, people would make claims, former players would make claims of cognitive disabilities based on the fact that they played football. And what the NFL said was, if you're black and you're making a claim of cognitive disability, but you didn't start the analysis with the assumption that you're not cognitively as able as a white person to begin with, then we're going to call into question your claim that you've been disabled. It's absolutely disgraceful.
And by the way, there's no denying on the part of the league they had used that. What's the relevance of race norming to your client's case here?
Well, look, ultimately, I think you see a pattern throughout NFL history, starting with players to begin with, then starting with black quarterbacks, then to black coaches, head coaches, et cetera, and especially front office people, where there is a historic perception, I believe, that black individuals are simply not smart enough to do the jobs that white people think require a high level of intelligence, like quarterbacking, like offensive coordinators, quarterback coaches, head coaches, GMs, et cetera. And that's, I think, at the root of the problem.
You also, in your pleadings, you say in certain critical ways the NFL is racially segregated and is managed much like a plantation. Could you flesh that out a little bit for us?
Sure. Well, you have a situation where, look, no one is saying that NFL players, the black ones nor the white ones are slaves, right? But what we're trying to point out is that you have a league that has no black ownership. We have white billionaire owners who own the teams, and you've got front offices that are largely white. And you've got these individuals who are profiting off of not only the work, but the injuries, the devastation, the broken bones, the torn ACLs, the cognitive disabilities of a largely black workforce.
You know, when I read about the case, I saw your client on CNN this morning. I'm assuming everybody who's focused on this in the last 24 hours has had almost the exact same reaction that I have had, which is that you contend that racism interfered with your client's career. Is he not worried that speaking out is going to end his career? Who is going to hire Brian Flores when he has the courage to stand up and say the things he's been saying about owners, about the league, about all that sort of thing?
Well, he is unfortunately concerned because we've seen the NFL and other organizations time after time blackball people who do stand up. But I think that is an important point to make for people to understand how credible Mr. Flores is. He could have gone away. He could have gotten a coordinator job somewhere. He could have stayed in the running, and he is at least ostensibly still in the running for some other head coach jobs. But he felt so strongly about this. And at the age of 40, not on his way out the door, at the age of 40 in the prime of his career, that he was going to bring this suit because of the wrongs that he's observed at the NFL.
Well, Colin Kaepernick 2.0, in my estimation. What is he looking for? What does he want to get out of this lawsuit?
It sounds simple, but change. At the end of the day, right now, it starts with the owners, right? We have a virtually all white ownership. We have no black owners. We need black owners in this league. We need more black people in the front office. We need more black head coaches, coordinators, et cetera. And so he's going to use this platform and this lawsuit to attempt to drive change in the NFL.
Michael Willemin, thanks so much for your time, and thank your client for his courage. We appreciate your time.
Thank you so much. Good evening.
Be well.